When dealing with walls, the Align tool allows us to line up different walls with one another. To see this in action, let's zoom in over here to the left-hand side of our building and then taking a look right about where column grid B is at. What I'd like to do is extend this particular wall over and align it with this wall. To do that, we need to start off by selecting on this particular curtain wall. Now, select on the Align tool. After picking on Align, pick the face of this mullion and then the endpoint of this curtain wall. And we can see they're now lined up with one another. If we click the little padlock, they'll stay lined up with one another, even if the floor plate should change a little bit, so that maybe this curtain wall would expand out to be a foot further out or a foot further in. This wall would also get a little bit longer or a little bit shorter as required. Also, if we zoom back out again, come over to this side of the model, let's go through the same process. Except in this case, I want to bring these walls down to line up with the face of the mullion. Hit Escape a couple times to get out of the command, select on the curtain wall, and then choose Align. Make sure that you have a check mark in multiple alignment. If you do, it means that we can pick this wall and have them both come down. So, highlight on the face of this mullion right here. Pick the face of this, and what it'll do is it's going to drop this down so it's in alignment where this blue dashed line is at. Do the same thing over here, and we can see they're now both aligned flush with this wall here. Now, if we hit Escape a couple of times, it may look like they're not quite perfectly aligned, but the only reason is that the lines have different thicknesses associated with them. If we want to see this without the line thicknesses getting involved, move up here to the View tab and pick on Thin Lines. And we can see that, in fact, these lines do line up. Now, let's do the same thing over here. What we'd like to do is have the face of this wall line up with the endpoint of this wall right here. So, let's go through the same process. Select on one of the walls, come up to Align, pick the face you want to align to, and then pick the face that you want to have aligned to that blue dashed line down there below. And we can see it's now moved it off, and it's now lined up this wall with the endpoint of this wall right here. So the Align tool's job is to line up the face of one object to the face of another object. The Split Wall tool is used when you need to split a wall into multiple different pieces. In this example, let's zoom into this room right here between your column grids 3 and 4. What I'd like to do is split this wall up into multiple pieces. To begin doing that, we need to first select on the wall, then come up to the Split Element tool up here on the ribbon. Click on Split Element, and the most important thing is this box over here, and it's called Delete Inner Segment. If we have Delete Inner Segment checkmarked, what it will do, and you'll see this little X-Acto knife blade saying I'm going to split wherever this blade is touching. So click once right about in this location. Because Delete Inner Segment is checked, if you click again, it'll delete the inner segment between the first spot and the second spot that you picked. So this wall is still a full height wall. This is still a full height wall, but there's no wall located in this location anymore. Now, the other thing that you could do, and in order to execute this, let's hit Escape on the keyboard a couple of times, come up here to the Undo key, and select Undo twice. The first time removes the second split that we did. The second undo removes the first spot that we clicked on the wall. So select on the wall, come up here to the Split Element tool, and in this case, let's do the second thing that we can do, which is clear out Delete Inner Segment. It'll no longer ask us to click twice to create an opening. In this case, we're only going to click once. Now, move your X-Acto knife blade until this one line goes straight up and down, right in that location, right down the center of this wall. When you're there, click. It doesn't look like anything has happened. Now, on some monitors, you might see a line going straight up and down at this point. It just sort of depends on the computer that you're at. Hit Escape a couple times on the keyboard, and one of the things you'll see is if you highlight over the left-hand side and then highlight over the right-hand side, that this wall is now split in half exactly in that location that we just selected at. And by doing this, we can now select on the right-hand side and then hit the delete key on the keyboard to delete that inner wall segment that was there. So the split tool allows us to either delete the inner segment between two spots that we pick, or by clearing out the check mark for deleting our segment, it'll split a wall up into one half and then another half. The wall tools can be found in Revit on the ribbon underneath the Architecture tab. Now, technically, there are two separate buttons associated with the wall tool. The first button is the actual picture of the wall itself. And if that would be selected, it would activate whatever the last wall command that had been used. But the wall commands themselves can be found underneath the word wall and the little down arrow. So select on the wall tool, the actual word wall. When you do this, you'll find three separate types of walls that you can do. One's an architectural wall, the next is a wall structural, and the third is a wall by face. And based on whichever the last one you've selected and drawn in your drawing area is, that's the command that will activate if you ever select on the picture of the wall up above. So that we can see the difference between a structural wall and an architectural wall, first select on Wall Structural. When you do this, and you scroll down on your properties, you'll see that the structural area underneath properties has some different structural components associated with it, such as standard information related to the depth of the rebar covers and analytical analysis that can be applied to the walls. In other words, this is setting up your walls so that they can be designed by a structural engineer and have rebar inserted into them. Also, so that they can be exported out for structural analysis. Now, if you need to do these things, then using a structural wall is probably the proper way to go. On the other hand, if this seems to be overkill for what you're trying to accomplish, then using an architectural wall might make more sense. Hit the escape key on your keyboard once, hit it a second time, come back up to the wall tool, and select on Wall Architectural. When you do this, and you come down on your properties, you'll see that structural is currently grayed out. What this means is that you don't have to specify the depth at which the rebar is going to be inside of the wall, or you're never going to need to export out any structural properties to third-party software for structural analysis. We find that most architects are going to be using architectural walls, while structural engineers are more likely to use the structural walls. The third type of wall that was on the list is a wall by face, and it's separate from these two types of walls. And if you just hover over that command for about a second, you'll get a flyout that shows what it does. By using wall by face, you select on the outside of that cylinder in order to create a wall that takes on the form of that shape. This is how you can go about designing some of your more complex wall types. You can find your wall command underneath the Architecture tab in Wall, remembering that the word wall will enable you to do either an architectural wall, a structural wall, which will give you those analytical properties, a wall by face, which enables some of the more complex walls, and then the picture of the wall up here on top will automatically execute whatever the last tool it is that you had used. Walls in Revit don't have to just be straight lines. They can be arcs and polygons and a variety of other shapes. To achieve these different shapes, underneath the Architecture tab, select on the Wall tool, then pick Wall Architectural off of the list. You'll see that there's a Draw panel now up on the ribbon, and on the Draw panel, there's a variety of different shapes that we can choose from. The first one is the Straight Line tool, or just called Line. And that's the one that we may be used to, which is select a point, move over to the right, and pick again, and that'll give us a straight line. If we want a straight line that's a specific length, you click once, move over in the right direction, and then type in the dimension that you'd like the wall to be. In this case, if I wanted a wall that was 70 feet long, I just type in 70, enter on the keyboard, and now we have a wall that's 70 feet long. Hit escape a couple of times to get out of the command. Once again, execute the Wall Architectural command, and this time pick Rectangle off of the list. The rectangle allows us to draw 4 walls at once. So you pick your first spot, pick your second spot, hit the escape key once, and you'll be able to highlight each of these walls independently. We drew all 4 walls at the same time, but they're independent of each other. So if we wanted to erase or change one of the walls, we could. There are two different polygon commands. We'll select circumscribe polygon. Pick the number of sides that we want, perhaps 8. Click in your drawing area, and then the radius of this circle, I'll just type in 20. And now we have the polygon going around that circular shape of the radius that we specified. We can do the same thing with the circle command. Pick the midpoint, draw it out, click again, there's a circle. We can do a couple of different types of arcs. Pick 2 points and then specify the radius. There's a tool here called the Pick Lines tool, which means if there's already lines drawn, you can pick those lines and have a wall automatically generate itself based on those lines. Let's try that really fast. Underneath the Architecture tab, click Model Line. Draw a line on your screen, or it could be 2 or 3 lines on your screen, and then hit Escape a couple of times to get out of the command. Once again, come into the Wall tool, Wall Architectural, use the Pick Lines tool, pick each of those lines, and you'll see your walls will automatically take on the shape of whichever lines they are that you picked. This works really well if someone has used an outside CAD program, particularly a CAD program that does all their drawings in 2D, and you want to trace over it really quickly. You can use the Pick Lines tool to do that. I'm going to execute the Wall Architectural tool one more time. And in particular, I want to show this one, which is the Fillet Arc tool. If you select on Fillet Arc, click Radius here on the options bar, type in 8 for 8 feet, then pick one wall, then the other wall. We can see it's done a radius right there, and it's cleaned the walls up in that location. Hit Escape a couple times on your keyboard to get out of the command. And so you have the full effect of exactly what it is that you've been drawing. At the top of your screen, click on the default 3D view house. And you'll see these walls and their different shapes. So if you want to be able to draw your walls with different shapes, or draw multiple walls to make up a shape, execute the Wall tool, pick the appropriate wall tool off of the list, and then underneath the Draw panel, pick either arc or rectangle, circle, polygons, or, of course, lines, in order to be able to draw that kind of shape that you want to be able to draw with your wall. This gray bar that we see on the screen that goes across the top of our drawing area is called the Options bar. Whenever we're executing a wall command, and we can do that by coming underneath the Architecture tab, selecting on the word Wall, and picking Wall Architectural, it will give us a variety of different options associated with that command. The first option will be height. And if we choose height off the list, it'll give us a wall that goes up from the level that this wall is being drawn at. If we choose depth, it'll give us a wall that goes down from the level that the wall is being drawn at. Depth is a good example of a foundation wall, while height is a good example of an exterior wall on the outside of your building. Choose height off of the list because we're going to draw some walls that go up. Basically, the warning is saying is that this wall is going to go up and it wants you to be aware of it. The next one over is, do we want this wall to go up to a certain level, or do we want to give it an unconnected height? If we choose a certain level, then that wall will go from the level that we're currently drawing the wall on up to the level that we choose. On the other hand, if we select unconnected, we could then type in the dimension that we want for this wall. It won't be restricted to a specific level. It'll be whatever height that we tell that wall to be. In this instance, let's type in 12. So the wall will be a 12-foot tall wall when we finally draw it. There's an option that says location line. We'll take a look at what location line does here in just a moment, but let's start the process of actually drawing a wall in. If you click once and move over toward your right-hand side, if the location line was telling us that this was going to go down the wall center line, this dashed line that shows up right there would be going right down the center of the wall. In my case, it's finished face of exterior, so that blue dashed line that shows up is on the finished face of the exterior side of my wall. If I click once to place it, we can see that the wall is drawn in. I'm going to hit Escape on my keyboard once, move up here. In this case, I'll select Wall Center Line. For many of you, yours may have defaulted to wall center line before. But you'll notice that if I start to draw a wall now, then now that dashed line is right down the wall center line of my wall. I'm going to click again, hit escape to get out of the command. I'm going to execute the command one more time. Now some of the other available here are the core center line, which is different from the center line of the wall because the core center line will give us a line right down the center of the structural part of the wall. Finish face exterior and finish face interior, that will allow us to draw the wall based off the finished materials on either the exterior side or the interior side of our walls. Core face exterior and core face interior, that will draw our wall based on the structural elements inside of the wall. In other words, if this wall had CMU block, it'd be off the face of the block. If this wall was made up of 2x4s, 2x6s, then it would be to the face of the studs of the wall, and that would be the core faces of those. And what I mentioned before, which is the core center line, that would be the center of those structural members inside of the wall. The next option there is chain. Chain allows you to draw one wall after another. And you can see each time that I click, it immediately draws another wall. If chain is not selected, each time that I click, it'll put a space between each click that I do as I'm drawing my walls in. And of course, if I put chain back on again, it will draw one wall after another. Another option that's there is offset. If we add an offset distance to this, it'll then draw your wall offset that distance away from those 2 points that you pick. Also, if you hit the space bar while drawing it, it'll flip it to the other side. So if you want the wall to be actually offset not above the line, but below it, you can hit the space bar, then click in order to be able to place your wall. The final tool up here is going to be radius. What radius allows us to do is specify a radius whenever two walls are drawn. Hit escape once. Let's clear out the radius box. Let's make sure that there's no offset when we're getting ready to draw these walls. Click the radius checkbox now. We can see in this case it's at 8 feet. If yours isn't, just highlight in here and type in 8 feet. Click once, draw your first wall, then try to make a 90-degree angle and then click again. And you'll see that you'll get a nice big radius between the first wall that you drew and the next wall that you drew. So the options bar will assign a variety of different options to these walls, including whether or not the wall goes up or down, whether or not the wall goes from one level to the next level, or just goes to the height that you specify. It also will allow you to draw from the center line of the wall to the finished faces of the wall, or even to the finished face of the structural members on the inside of the wall. Chain allows you to do one wall after another. Offset will mean that when you're drawing your wall will be offset a certain distance from the spots that you're picking. And then radius will give you this nice clean radius between the first wall that you draw and the last wall that you draw. So the options bar give you a variety of different options related to the walls that you're drawing. Revit has a variety of wall styles and types that you can choose from. To see some of these styles, let's activate the Wall command from underneath the Architecture tab and select on the word Wall. Pick on Wall Architectural, and then on the Type Selector list on Properties, we'll see one of those many wall styles that are available to us. Click the picture of the wall, and here we'll see that there's a basic wall, and these are a variety of different wall styles associated with the basic wall type. Some of these have multiple materials and different kinds of structural properties associated with these walls, while others are very generic walls that can be used during the design process and can be replaced with some of the more complex walls that we see on the list. Also, if we move down, we'll find some curtain wall types and different styles of curtain walls, as well as a stacked wall type and one style of stacked wall. The stacked wall type, what it does is it allows you to stack more than one of the basic wall types, such as we saw up here at the top of the list, on top of each other. Just so that we can see that, if we click on the exterior brick over CMU with metal stud wall, and then draw in plan view that wall type. Next, let's take a look at this in 3D. come up to your 3D icon, which looks like a little house, and click on it. Here we can see one wall and then a second wall type drawn on top of each other. And together they make up the stacked wall style. Move over, select back on the wall command so we can execute the wall architectural again. The curtain walls are made up of different panels along with mullions in between each of the panels. To draw those, it's drawing them the same way. You'd select, in this case, storefront off of the list. And even in 3D, you can draw this. Click your first point, click your next point, and then you'll start to see your storefront wall drawn in place, with glass panels and mullions automatically attached. Then you have your basic wall styles, and then picking one of the basic wall styles off of the list. In this case, I'll select the brick on CMU, click here, draw over in this direction. One of the interesting things that has happened in this case is that we're actually looking at the back of the wall. So to see the other side of the wall, come over and click on one of these corners, in this case, one of the outside edges of the view cube. By selecting on the corner of the view cube, it'll automatically spin your model around, and you'll be able to see that material on the exterior side of this particular wall. So there are three major different wall categories inside of Revit. The first one, and if we select on wall and wall architectural, we'll be able to see it in the type selector list, and that is the basic wall type. That's probably 90% of the walls that you do inside of the program are a basic wall. And then you could select any of these and draw them in. Then there are curtain walls, which are panels with mullions surrounding them. And the final wall type is a stacked wall type, which combines one of the basic wall types and another one of the basic wall types. And when you draw them, it'll draw them directly on top of one another. Whenever you're working on a project, simply find the kind of wall that you want to draw, highlight it here in the type selector list, and that will be the type of wall that you're drawing inside of the drawing area. With walls, the level of detail allows us to be able to see the different layers of material associated with a wall. Or it may remove those different layers of material so that we don't see them in that particular view. To understand this a little bit better, let's zoom in here on our first floor plan view, and what we have on the screen is a section symbol going through the wall, and a wall with several layers of material going from left to right. Currently, we can't see any of those different layers of materials. To get a better idea what this wall might actually look like without the thick lines coming around it, let's take a look at it by coming up here to the View tab and selecting on View. Move over and click on Thin Lines. And this is going to remove those dark lines showing up here. Now that the dark lines are gone, we can see that there's something right here, and then we can see the rest of the wall. Well, the something that we're looking at right here is a sill, and we'll be able to take a look at that here in just a minute in a 3D view. Now, if I zoom back out so we can see the entire wall, move your mouse down, and select on this white box right next to the scale, and it's called Detail Level Coarse. Click on that. You'll find that in Revit, medium and fine almost always gives you the same level of detail. There are some subtle differences. Medium will sometimes show a minute less amount of detail. Sometimes fine will give you more rounded edges or more defined edges. But for the most part, medium and fine are the same. And coarse will present just like we're seeing here in the plan view. If you choose fine, zoom in a touch, you'll be able to see each layer of material that make up this wall. Let's take a look at this in a 3D view just for a moment. Come up here, select on a little 3D house. If your wall looks like this, you need to be able to see it from the other side. Just click on this upper edge of the view cube, and it'll spin the wall around, and you'll be able to see it from this side. In the plan view, I said there was this little sill that was showing up there. What I was really referring to is this piece right here. It's sort of jutting out away from the wall, and we could see that in our plan view. That really wasn't affected by that level of detail. Now, close down this 3D view by clicking on the X here in the corner. Select on the section symbol. When it highlights and turns blue, right-click on it and select Go to View. This will take you to a section view of this particular wall. In this case, we can see that the wall has multiple layers of materials associated with it. And there's that sill piece again that I was talking about earlier. Also, if you move down to the bottom of the screen, right here where the scale is at, click and then change this to coarse, you'll notice that those layers of material go away. Now, this level of detail is more than likely going to be appropriate for most building sections, where you don't want to see every layer of material, but you still want to be able to see the thicknesses of the walls, or floors, or roof, or any of those kinds of objects. On the other hand, if you want to do enlarged details, true section views where you're going to be defining each layer of material, come down, change this to a fine level of detail, and you'll then be able to see each layer of material, may it be in walls, or this is appropriate as well in roofs, floors, ceilings, a wide variety of different kinds of Revit objects. There's a multitude of ways to be able to see a wall's properties after it's been placed. In this example, let's select on this wall that's drawn here in the middle of our screen. After selecting it, we can look at its properties underneath Properties. The first spot is going to be the Type Selector list. This is going to show what type of wall this is. Below that, we'll be able to see how the wall was drawn as far as its location line. Further down, we'll be able to tell that this wall was drawn on level 1. We can see it has an unconnected height of 20 foot. So this wall was drawn on our first floor, and it has a height of 20 feet tall. As we move down, we'll see such information as room bounding. The room bounding checkbox allows us to allow rooms to find this wall. In Revit, rooms are actual objects, and when you place a room, they'll automatically expand out until they find any object that has room bounding enabled. And that's what this checkbox here allows it to do. It allows room objects to see walls inside of Revit. As we scroll down even farther, we can see dimensions associated with this particular wall. In this case, we can see it's 63 feet 6 inches, as well as the area and volume of the wall. And we can see what phase this was created in. Phasing is periods of time in Revit, so we can tell that this was created in the new construction phase and it's never been demolished. All these properties inside of this particular dialog box are called instance properties or instance parameters. Another kind of property that's available to us are type parameters. These can be found underneath the Edit Type button. And if you select on Edit Type, it'll bring up the Type Properties dialog box. And from here, we'll see more properties associated with the walls, including this thing called Coarse Scale Fill Pattern. What Coarse Scale Fill Pattern does in relationship to walls is if you select inside of this box, click on this little dot, you can then tell this wall that at a coarse level of detail, it should be filled up with a certain pattern. In this example, I'll just select a solid fill and click on OK. For the Coarse Scale Fill color, what this does is it allows us to change the color from being black to be a different color. Now, usually if I'm going to enable this particular function, this is usually for nice, pretty presentation plans. So the walls are going to be filled in dark. But in this case, just so that we can see the color, I'm going to choose a green color off of the list and pull this bar up. Now, click on OK once you get your color. We can see that it now has the right color associated with it. And we'll take a look at that over here in just a moment. If you select on the Edit button, this is where each layer of material is that makes up these different walls. And we can see the thicknesses as well as what each material is that makes the wall up. If we want to see this a little bit better, we can pull this over by just clicking on this top bar, pulling it over, and selecting on the Preview button, and it'll show us a preview of what it'll look like in Plan View, as well as if we come down here in View and click on Section, click inside of this area, and you'll be able to spin the wheel to be able to zoom in and zoom out to see all the different layers of materials that make up this wall. Now, let's get out of this by clicking on OK. You notice this is solid fill in green, but this is only going to show up at a coarse level of detail. Click on OK to this. Click here in the drawing area, and if you zoom in, you'll be able to see that this wall is now this green color. But this could be anything. This could be any sort of pattern, so it could be lines or dashes or dots. And this will only show up at a coarse level of detail. So if you come down to this box, click on it and change this to fine, you'll notice that that particular color goes away in this instance. Your properties allow you to be able to manipulate 1, the way that the wall looks. 2, the materials that are going to be associated with the wall. Also, 3, it's going to allow us to be able to change things as the height of the wall, what level that the wall is going to be hosted along with, how the wall is drawn, and a variety of other kinds of properties. And if you want to be able to make changes to a wall, just remember, select on the wall first, and then adjust its properties over here underneath Properties. Basic wall styles are used for a wide variety of different types of walls in Revit, and they're by far the most used walls in the program. To draw in some basic walls, let's begin by making sure that we're underneath Level 1 on floor plans in the project browser. Now, the reason I'm going to be on Level 1 is when we draw these walls in our project, I want the base or the bottom of the walls to be at the elevation of Level 1. Then I'm going to have the tops of these walls either go up to Level 2, Level 3, or as high as Level 5, their own different elevations. Let's take a look here at those heights by coming underneath Elevations and then double-clicking on South in the project browser. Now, if you zoom in on the different levels over on the right-hand side, you'll see that Level 1's at 0 feet 0 inches, and that's where the bottom of each of these walls is going to be located at. Level 2's at the 10-foot mark, Level 3's at 20, Level 4's at 30, and then Level 5, which is going to be the top of the parapet or the top of the exterior walls, is going to be all the way up at 33 feet in the air. Now, click on the X in the upper right-hand corner of the screen to close down the south elevation view. Now we want to draw in some regular walls here in our view, and we'll start by drawing them in where these green lines are located at. And this is going to draw a garage in the upper right-hand side of our site. Make sure that you can see your properties palette, and now select on the picture of the wall underneath Architecture. When you do this, you'll see on the type selector list on Properties that Basic Wall 8-inch shows up. It's going to be called Generic 8-inch, and if you scroll down on the type selector list, you'll be able to see the variety of different wall types that are currently loaded into this project. Everything that we're looking at in this grouping, they're all underneath Basic Wall Styles. The first one that I want to do is going to be the exterior brick and CMU on a metal stud. This is the wall type at the very top of the list. Click on that to select it, and we're going to draw that in where these green lines are at. Zoom in so that you can see each of those green lines. Make sure that the height up here on the options bar is selected. If you chose depth instead, the walls would go down. Because height is selected, the walls will go up. This warning message is just because I had changed from height to depth and back to height again. Where it has unconnected, change that to be Level 3. If we left it at unconnected, we could have typed in the exact height we wanted the wall to go to. By telling it Level 3, it means that these walls are going to go up to the Level 3 elevation, whatever that is. Location line, it's a wall center line currently, but what that means is that the walls will get drawn directly centered on these green lines. And that's not really what I want to do. I want the outside edges of these walls to be lined up with the green line. Let's choose Finish Face of Exterior. So the outside face of the exterior wall, that's where it's going to line up with. Make sure that Chain has a check mark in it. And now see that that line is highlighted. With the line highlighted, come down and click the upper left-hand corner first, move over, and when you do this, you'll see a temporary dimension going across the top of the screen. Now, we're not going to type in anything here, but I do want to point out that whenever you see that temporary dimension, and we can see it changing its numerical value as I move from one side to the other, whenever you see that, you can type in a dimension, such as 10 feet or 20 feet, and the wall will automatically become that length that you type in. In this case, though, I don't exactly know what the total length of this line is, so I'm just going to come over here and just click at the end of the line. I'm going to continue that process of just clicking all the way around where the green lines are at until I come all the way back to this first endpoint where we first started the walls. And we can see the walls have cleaned up on themselves to have nice, perfectly clean corners. Hit Escape a couple of times to get out of the command. Let's take a look at this in 3D. And we can do that by clicking on the little house icon up here at the top of the screen. And it's called Default 3D View. This is currently how they look. Also, if you move your cursor down toward the bottom of the screen, there's a box there that says Visual Style. If you select on that and pick on Shaded, you'll be able to see colors. So you can see it's a red brick as well as a gray CMU block down at the bottom of the walls. Now, I'm going to zoom back out again and now click on the X in the upper right-hand side of the drawing area. After doing that, zoom back out, and now we're going to draw some walls here for the main body of the building. The first wall we're going to do is going to be an exterior wall, and it's going to be for this line right here. To do that, underneath the Architecture tab, once again, select on the picture of the wall. Instead of this wall type, though, we're going to choose another one off of the type selector list, and it's going to be exterior insulation on masonry. Its height, it probably shouldn't go all the way up to level 5, but just for this example, we're going to go ahead and take it all the way on up to level 5 because we can adjust that height later. Change that to be level 5. Location line, that's good. And chain, make sure that it still has a check mark in it. Now, the one thing I do want to change is going to be up here. Before we were drawing this using the line tool, and we could do that exact same thing again by clicking line and then clicking again. But another tool that's available to us, since we already have the line work drawn out, is this tool here called the Pick Lines tool. And if you select on Pick Lines, verify that this information is still the same on the options bar. It should be. Now move down, and then based on which side of the line your cursor is at, you'll see a dashed line. Make sure that dashed line is on the inside of the line, or in this case, that means underneath the line. And when you see that dashed line there, click to place your wall. Over here underneath Properties on the Type Selector list, select where it has the basic wall exterior insulation on masonry, and we're going to choose a different type of wall off the list. It's going to be the generic 8-inch masonry, and we're going to do a few more walls using this wall type. For the height, we're going to leave it at level 5. Move over here to where it has line and just that single dash line going to the left-hand side and click. Do that again in this location. Do that again here at the smaller line at this location. For this line, make sure that the dash line is above it. Same with this line here. Make sure that the dash line is above it. One of the things that you'll notice is that this column, which is an architectural column, is automatically cleaning up with this wall right here. Later on, this wall will get moved away from the column. And when it does, this column will automatically heal itself again, so it'll once again be perfectly round. For the next wall that we want to do, move your cursor up and make sure that the dashed line is toward the right this time of that line to place that wall in. Now there are 3 more kinds of walls that I want to place in here. There's going to be a wall here, and then a wall here. But I don't want them to be the generic 8-inch masonry. So once again on the type selector list, we're going to be looking for 4 7/8 inch thick wall. This interior 4 7/8 inch partition 1 hour wall will work just fine for us. So select on that. The height, in this case, I only want it to be going up to level 2. It's not going to go all the way up to the roof. So level 2 will work just fine. The location, in this case, let's do it to the inside face of the wall for once. So choose Finish Face of Interior. Make sure that the dash line on this line here that's over on the left-hand side, that the dash line is on the right-hand side of that line, and then click. Do the same thing with this line right here, making sure the dash line's on the right. And with this one, make sure the dash line is on the left. Hit Escape a couple of times to get out of the command. Now, to get a better look at what it is we've drawn, move back up here to the 3D view and select on the default 3D view. And here we can see the different walls that we've drawn in at different elevations. These going up to level 2, this went up to level 3, and these went up to level 5. So to draw in your different basic wall types, you come underneath the Architecture tab, select on the picture of the wall, choose the type of wall that you want off of the list, and then set all the properties related to that type of wall. And by the way, we now have level showing up here just because we're in a 3D view. When you're in a plane view, it automatically assumes the level, so it doesn't give you that option. But you set all the options related to that wall here on the options bar going across the top of the screen. If you need to make a copy of a wall an exact distance away from another wall, you can do that by using a command called offset. Now to execute that command, Let's take a look at these two walls that are close to each other here in our drawing. What I'd like to do is make a copy of this wall here and copy it over to the right-hand side to make a similar space as to what we see over here on the left-hand side. And ultimately, these are going to be two different restrooms. So to do that, move your mouse over here and then select on this wall. When you do that, you'll have your modified tools available to you here on the ribbon. After that, move up and then select on the Offset command. Click on Offset. We're going to select a numerical distance, and it's going to be offset a certain distance away from this wall. Now, I do want it to be offset 8 feet. But there's one thing to consider. It's not really getting offset by just 8 feet. In order to do that, I also have to compensate for whatever the width of the wall is. And in this case, this wall is 4 7/8 inches thick. So I need to add that to my dimension. So up here on the offset, I'm going to type in 8 foot. I'm going to put a space in 4, another space in 7/8. By doing this, it's going to offset this wall 8 feet, 4 7/8 inches in the direction I specify. Move your mouse into this area, highlight on the wall, make sure that the dashed line shows up over on the right-hand side, and then click at that point. Now this is exactly 8 feet away. Actually, from the face of this wall to the face of this wall, exactly 8 feet. If we want to take a look at that, we can. Hit Escape a couple times on the keyboard, select on one of your walls. It actually doesn't matter which one you select. Come up here and then choose on Measure Between Two References. Click the face of this wall, then click the face of the other wall, and you'll see that it's 8 feet in between them. The trick is to first select the wall that you want to offset. Then give it the length or the distance you want to offset it away from the other wall, and also take into consideration if you want that specific distance between the two walls, that distance plus the thickness will equal the total distance that needs to be offset to give you that interior dimension. The Trim command allows two walls to come together at a common intersection. To see that, let's zoom in here to where we have column grid 2 and column grid B crossing each other. I'd like to have this wall and then this curtain wall to come together at a common intersection. To do that, I'm going to begin by selecting on the wall itself. After the wall's been highlighted, take a look up here on the ribbon. And there are technically 3 different commands which are considered the Trim command. The first one, and the one that's really probably the most common, is Trim Extend the Corner, where you select on one wall, select on another wall, and they both come together at a corner. We're going to try that with this particular wall, and I'm going to tell you right now that it's not going to work quite right. And that's okay, but I wanted to show you what the effect is going to be. So, select here on the Trim Extend Corner, click on this wall, click on the line there that makes up the curtain wall, and it looks like it's going to bring them to a corner. But as you can see, they're hitting each other and not really cleaning up the way that you'd like them to clean up on one another. The reason is that one of these is a curtain wall and the other is a basic wall. Now, if this had been 2 curtain walls, they would have cleaned up on each other just fine. If these had been 2 basic walls, they also would have cleaned up on each other just fine. And when I use the term clean up, it means that when the 2 walls would touch each other, they'll have a nice, smooth material transition in between the 2 of them, as opposed to what we have here, where they just hit each other. So to undo this, I'm going to hit Escape a couple times on the keyboard, come up here to the Undo command, and click the Undo arrow. Now they've been pulled back apart again. Select once more on this wall. And there's 2 other kinds of trims that we could try instead. These 2, in fact, work almost identical to one another, except Trim Extend Multiple allows you to do more than one, and this first one just does it once. Let's use this Trim Extend Single Element. So click on that, move down here, and down here you'll be able to see it says Select a Reference as the Trim Extend Boundary. What it wants us to do is select on the face, in this case, of this mullion. Now click the end point of this wall. When you do that, it's now brought this wall down, so it's now perfectly in line where the edge of this mullion is at. Now let's do the same command again. We'll want to select on this face, and then bring this over so that it lines up here at the intersection. So there's two different, or technically three different types of trim commands that are available to us. The first one, which is trim extend to corner, on regular walls, such as these two basic wall types over here, it'll bring them together and bring them to a perfect corner and have no material problems. It'll just clean up on one another like this. In certain conditions, though, you may need to use trim extend single element. By using that, you can bring one wall down and line it up with another wall. By using that command twice, you can then bring them together. The third option, which is trim extend multiple elements, would have been if we had had 3 or 4 walls we wanted to bring up and have go flush against the face of this wall. We could have picked this wall first, and then picked each of the walls we wanted to stretch themselves out and then hit the face of this wall, and it would have worked with multiple walls instead of just the one wall. A curtain wall is a kind of wall that's usually made up of different panels as well as mullions. And these panels, in many cases, are made out of a glass-looking material. With this building, we're going to have a curtain wall that goes around the perimeter of our building, as well as a couple of interior curtain walls that will better define some of these interior spaces. To begin drawing these curtain walls in, we'll once again use the Wall command from underneath the Architecture tab. Pick on the picture of the wall. On the Type Selector list, underneath Curtain Wall, make sure that Storefront is selected. For height, since we're going around the outside first, make sure this goes up to level 5. That'll be the actual height. And there's also an option here called Offset. Type in 2 feet for the offset. Once you've done that, where this grid line A crosses over this wall, you'll see it comes to a little X. Click, and then move over toward your right-hand side. Zoom in a bit. Click at the intersection of these two grids, which is also the center of the column, and we can start to see this is the curtain wall, and here are the different mullions and individual panes of glass that make up this curtain wall system. Now, click again at the intersection of these two structural grids. At 1 and C, where those two cross each other, click. Come back out again, where 1 and A cross each other. I'm going to have you click. And then right here, where this line crosses over this line here that makes up the wall, click again. By doing that, we've now placed a curtain wall all the way around the perimeter of our building. By setting the 2-foot offset, instead of drawing that curtain wall right along this line, it offset it 2 feet in this direction so that it would be around the perimeter but still falling around these grid lines. If we zoom back out again, I want to put another one right in this location and yet another one in this location here. So zoom back in, execute the Wall command, make sure Storefront is checked, set that offset distance once again to be 2 feet. As far as the height, have this just go up to level 2. We don't need it to go up as high because it's only going to apply to this floor. Pick the intersection of these two lines, and then pick the intersection of that, and hit escape a couple of times to get out of the command. Now we can always use our modification tools later to clean up this so that this will come over to this wall and so that these two will come together at an intersection. Now do the exact same thing over here. Use the Wall command, make sure that this is level 2, set an offset distance of 2 feet, and then draw from the intersection of that wall in the line and this wall in the line. And then hit escape a couple of times to once again get out of the command. Now to get a better look at what it is that we've drawn up to this point, select on Default 3D View. And now you can see the curtain wall surrounding the outside of the building. And if you hold the Shift key down on your keyboard, as well as hold the wheel down at the same time, you can then rotate this around and be able to see the curtain wall on the inside as well. One final thing, if we move down here to the bottom of the screen and on Visual Style where it says Hidden Line, change this to Shaded, we'll be able to see the color of these individual panels that make up our curtain wall system. So curtain walls are drawn in much the same way as a regular wall. Just execute the wall command and then choose the appropriate curtain wall off of the list, and then pick each point that you'd like that curtain wall to be drawn in at, as well as setting the different options related to how high you want that curtain wall to be.